Enter the hush of the silent lodge. The candles are lit, the shadows stretch long, and tonight we open a manuscript nearly 2,500 years old. It is here, in the words of the philosopher Plato, that we first hear whispers of a vanished world. Atlantis. Around 360 BCE, Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In them, he described a mighty island empire, larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its people, blessed with great knowledge and power, grew proud and corrupt. And so, in a single terrible day and night, Atlantis sank beneath the sea, lost forever to the depths. For Plato, Atlantis was both a story and a warning, a tale of human ambition punished by divine justice. But was Plato's story pure invention? Some scholars say yes, that Atlantis was simply a parable, a cautionary tale about greed and the downfall of nations. Yet others wonder, did Plato preserve fragments of a much older memory, whispered down through generations before reaching his hand? Could Atlantis have been a civilization remembered dimly, long after it was gone? The question matters because Atlantis is more than just a myth. It touches a wound in human history, the gap between what we know and what may have been forgotten. Why do so many cultures, separated by oceans, speak of golden ages and sudden floods? Why do ruins around the world bear marks of knowledge beyond their time? These questions begin with Plato, but they do not end with him. And so the Lodge leaves you with this thought. When Plato spoke of Atlantis, was he warning us or reminding us of something humanity once knew, but buried beneath the waves of time? The silence deepens, and the next page turns. The tale of Atlantis did not sync with Plato's writings. For centuries, philosophers, mystics, and secret societies kept the legend alive, each reshaping it to fit their own hidden doctrines. To them, Atlantis was not merely a lost island, but a key to understanding the hidden path of human history. In the Middle Ages, scholars whispered of ancient civilizations that rose and fell before recorded time. Some believed Plato's Atlantis was one such memory, preserved in fragments while the rest was swallowed by the sea. The story became more than history. It became a symbol of wisdom lost, and perhaps wisdom waiting to be found. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, when Europe rediscovered forgotten manuscripts and ancient philosophies, Atlantis resurfaced again. Thinkers and explorers spoke of unknown lands across the ocean. Some wondered if the discovery of the New World was proof that Plato's account was more than myth, that perhaps the ruins of Atlantis lay just beyond the horizon. Secret orders took the story further. The Rosicrucians, wrapped in symbols and allegory, hinted that lost knowledge survived from forgotten ages, passed down through the initiated. To them, Atlantis represented a golden civilization that fell through pride but left traces of its wisdom hidden in symbols and secret teachings. In the 19th century, Atlantis took on new life once more. Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical movement, spoke of Atlantis as a stage in the spiritual evolution of humanity. In her writings, the Atlanteans were not only real, but were considered an advanced race, holders of great powers, destroyed when they misused their gifts. To her followers, the myth was no longer myth at all, but part of a cosmic history that shaped mankind's destiny. Others followed. Writers, mystics, and explorers connected the legend to everything from ancient Egypt to the lost tribes of the world. Some believed that the wisdom of the pyramids, the sacred geometry of temples, and the myths of gods descending from the sky were fragments of Atlantean knowledge scattered after the Great Fall. And in the darker corners of history, Atlantis was twisted into something else. In the 20th century, secret circles claimed it as proof of superior ancient races, misusing the myth to justify dangerous ideologies. In their hands, a story of pride and downfall became a tool of pride once again. Yet through all these echoes, one truth remains. The legend of Atlantis refuses to be silenced. It lingers in philosophy, in mysticism, and in the hidden symbols of societies that thrived on secrecy. To some, it was history, to others, allegory, but to all, it was a reminder that somewhere in humanity's past, there may lie a chapter untold. The Lodge leaves this question hanging in the air. If so many seekers across centuries guarded the memory of Atlantis, were they merely chasing shadows or protecting a forgotten truth? The Lodge turns another page, and we begin to follow the trail of evidence, the clues that suggest Atlantis may not be just a story. Scattered across the world are fragments, whispers, and ruins that point to something extraordinary hidden in humanity's past. First, the Great Flood myths. Nearly every ancient culture, from the distant Americas to Mesopotamia, from India to the far islands of the Pacific, tells of a time when the world was drowned by waters. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of a deluge that wiped out civilization. The Hebrew Bible recalls Noah's Ark and the flood that covered the earth. The Aztec codices describe suns and worlds destroyed in water. Even in remote Polynesia, elders spoke of islands swallowed by the sea. How could such stories appear in cultures oceans apart unless they remembered a shared catastrophe? Perhaps these are not just myths, but fading memories of a cataclysm like the one Plato described. Then there are the ruins. Beneath the waves near Japan lies the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stone formation with steps, terraces, and flat surfaces that some argue were carved by human hands more than 10,000 years ago. Off the coast of the Bahamas, divers discovered the Bimini Road, great blocks of stone lying in straight lines as though part of an ancient harbor. In Turkey, far from any ocean, stands Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex 12,000 years old, built before farming, before writing, before cities were thought possible. Who raised such monuments at the dawn of civilization, and where did their knowledge come from? Across the continents, mysteries multiply. The pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica rise in striking alignment with the stars. Megaliths in Britain, Malta, and South America display an engineering precision we still struggle to explain. These sites appear like echoes, fragments of an advanced understanding that should not have existed in their time. Could these be the fingerprints of Atlantis, scattered across the earth when survivors carried their wisdom to new lands? And then there is the question of knowledge itself. Ancient myths speak of gods and sages who descended to teach humanity how to farm, how to build, how to measure the heavens. The Sumerians told of the Apkallu, the Egyptians of Thoth, the Greeks of Prometheus. Always the story is the same, wisdom delivered suddenly, as though from elsewhere. If Atlantis was real, perhaps it was not just a place, but the source of these teachings, a lost cradle of human advancement erased by disaster. The silence of the Lodge presses close as we weigh these clues. Flood myths shared across the globe, ruins that defy explanation, knowledge appearing too soon, too suddenly, to be chance. Are these the shattered pieces of Atlantis, scattered like relics after a storm? Or are we chasing phantoms, seeing patterns in the dust of time? The Lodge opens its next page, and here the whispers grow darker. For if Atlantis was more than a parable, then what force erased it? Was it divine wrath, as Plato claimed, or was it something written into the earth itself? Modern science speaks of a time known as the Younger Dryas, a sudden and violent shift in climate that struck the world around 12,000 years ago. Glaciers melted, sea levels surged, and much of the northern hemisphere was thrown into chaos. Some researchers suggest it may have been caused by a comet impact, shattering the skies and unleashing fire, floods, and centuries of cold. If true, this cataclysm falls at the very time Plato placed the destruction of Atlantis. A coincidence? Or a clue? Geologists find traces of massive floods, not myths, but torrents of water so great they carved valleys in days. In North America, the Missoula floods left scars still visible across the land. In the Black Sea, evidence suggests that rising oceans swallowed entire coastlines. And on the sea floor, ruins and roads now lie buried beneath meters of sand and coral. It is as though the ocean rose up to claim the works of forgotten hands. This leads some to argue that civilization is not a steady climb from caves to cities, but a cycle of rise and fall. That perhaps humanity had reached higher once before, building, exploring, discovering, only to be struck down and reset. In this view, Atlantis is not unique. It is one of many lost chapters in a much older human story. Thinkers like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson propose that the great myths of floods and golden ages are the cultural memory of this forgotten disaster. They argue that survivors carried fragments of knowledge forward, planting the seeds of civilizations that rose later in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and beyond. In their theory, Atlantis was not fantasy, but the echo of an advanced world destroyed by forces beyond its control. Yet this idea remains controversial, even forbidden in some circles. Mainstream history holds fast to the belief that complex civilization began only 6,000 years ago. To suggest otherwise challenges the very foundation of what we are taught. And so the story of Atlantis lives in the margins, dismissed by many, but burning brighter in the imaginations of those who sense that history hides more than it reveals. But the Lodge reminds us, every myth begins with a fragment of truth. The flood myths, the ruins, the scars of ancient cataclysms, they whisper of a time before, a time when the world was different. Perhaps Atlantis was not just a city swallowed by the sea, but the symbol of a cycle humanity may face again. The Lodge opens once more, and the candlelight flickers as if stirred by an unseen breath. We have followed Atlantis from Plato's pen, through the whispers of mystics, across the ruins of the world, and into the shadow of cataclysms. Now we are left with the question that lingers like smoke in the air. What does this lost world mean for us today? Perhaps Atlantis was never a place at all, but a mirror. A story warning us of what happens when power outruns wisdom, when pride outweighs humility. In Plato's telling, the Atlanteans were not destroyed simply by chance, but by their own corruption. They had grown too powerful, too arrogant, and so they fell. If that is the truth behind the myth, then Atlantis is less about the past and more about the present, a caution carved into the memory of humanity. And yet, if Atlantis was real, if a civilization once thrived and perished in a single night of fire and flood, then the lesson is sharper still. It tells us that the world itself is fragile, that whole chapters of human history can be erased in an instant, leaving only whispers behind. We live, as they once did, on the edge of nature's vast and hidden powers. To believe we are immune is to repeat their mistake. But Atlantis also carries hope. If survivors carried fragments of wisdom across oceans and time, then we are the heirs of a story much older than we know. The symbols carved into stone, the myths passed in secret, the ruins rising from forgotten soils, these may be gifts from those who endured the fall. If so, Atlantis is not only a warning, but also a reminder that human knowledge, though fragile, can endure even the darkest tides. This is why the story refuses to die. It lingers in philosophy, in legends, in the quiet corners of our imagination. Atlantis is both a ghost and a guide. Whether myth or memory, it calls us to look deeper, to question the surface of history, and to search the silence for what has been hidden. And so, the lodge closes its book for tonight. The candles burn low, the echoes fade, but the question remains. Was Atlantis a parable? A warning from Plato's mind? Was it the shattered memory of a real world drowned in ancient seas? Or is it something more, a prophecy, reminding us that what has fallen before can fall again? The silence lingers, heavy and watchful. The lodge leaves you to ponder in the dark. And until the next gathering, remember this: myths are never only stories. Sometimes they are the last surviving truths of worlds long lost. If you wish to walk further into the lodge, to join us in uncovering forgotten manuscripts, ancient symbols, and secrets buried in shadow, then take your place among the initiated. Subscribe, and the silence will always find you again. The silence continues.